They're going to tell you to euthanize your dog, as though that is less aversive than using a training tool.
There's a point where selfishness has to end, and you have to say, I love this animal enough not to let it suffer anymore.
There's so many dogs that people give up on because they're misinformed.
Hey, Jared here with Species Canine, our podcast. What is this, number 7? 7, with my fabulous co-host, the one and the only, Taylor. How are you, man?
I need to pick me up today.
You'll pick me up?
Pick me up, yeah.
Yep. Good. Coffee.
Yeah. Just need to inject it.
Yep. Good coffee. You can get a coffee enema. There's videos on YouTube about that.
I'm good. Don't
You
need
sure?
that much of a pick me up.
Yeah, well, to each their own. Just a little service announcement reminder to the folks out there. So Taylor and I come on here to discuss dog training, and sometimes we throw in our own opinions in there and our own thoughts on some things, but for the most part we try to stick to the science-based as much as possible. So we get comments and feedback on certain things, and some of the comments stuff we get feedback on is someone's opinion. And that's great. You have your own opinion, you're entitled to your opinion. We appreciate the feedback and the help and things like that, but we're not going to get in the back and forth of arguing with someone's opinion. We're here to share our knowledge, and Taylor and I are constantly learning, constantly reading new studies and learning from each other and learning from practice, doing this every day. Training dogs. This is what we do, and I learn something from every dog that we work with. So we appreciate the feedback. Like, subscribe. If somebody has a dog and they're struggling with it and they want some help, share the page. They can go to the website speciescanine.com. Tons of free information on there and things like that to help with that. So that is my soapbox rant.
Nice.
But I can do that. Know why? Because I have the microphone.
The multicolored microphone.
So what are we going to discuss today? Something lighthearted, I hope?
No, I wish. Yeah, so today's topic is euthanasia. It's something that everybody who gets a dog knows is ultimately down the road. You always say, what do you always say?
Getting a dog is like getting a small disaster. You know how it's going to end.
Yeah. So the topic of euthanasia and how you know when to make that decision, things that make that decision easier, and kind of some subtopics to that as well, like why people make that decision, whether it's for physical health reasons or some other reasons I think we can get into.
Yeah, so I don't think it's just euthanasia, right? I think it's just loss in general of our four-legged friends. It's not just making that decision. I think for me personally, an animal, just you wake up in the morning, you come out and your dog passed in sleep. That's so much easier to swallow and digest than making that decision that you have a live breathing animal and you take it to the vet and you made that decision to end its life. Because no matter what, for me anyway, you always have that doubt in the back of your head. Was there something different? Was there something I could have done? Is there another test we could have ran? Is there something else that could have been done to prolong life, right? Yeah. And I think the most important thing, and I have clients ask me this all the time, when is it time? And I always say when quality of life diminishes. There's a point in time in there where the selfishness of I love this animal has to end. And you have to say, I love this animal enough not to let it suffer anymore. And I think there's a lot of onuses on vets to have that conversation. I've had to put, several dogs down in my life. And actually one very recently, about a month ago or so, I had to put Ollie, my little Basenji, down. She had some really bad cancer that popped up, and, we thought it was an infection in her mammary gland area, and it wasn't. Doctor's like, yeah, this is cancer. It was just really bad. So it was just, she was in pain. It was just time, we needed to say goodbye. But the onus on the vets to have that conversation of like, look, let's try this, let's try this, give you those other options before they do that. I remember when I had to put my German Shepherd down 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, when I put her down, it was no questions asked. I walked in, the vet said, okay, I'm really sorry about this. And she was nice and polite, she was really sweet about it, but didn't ask one thing. Like,
Did you know it was time? Like, did you go to that vet appointment knowing it was time, or was it like a,
yes. So my German Shepherd had been struggling with her hips for a while and walking and things like that. And it was just kind of progressing worse and worse. And then I went to work, came home, and she didn't move all day. She was in the same exact spot, did not move.
yeah,
Tried getting her up. She got up, fell over, and I was like, I love her too much. I can't do this. I'm not gonna let her just agony and pain, right? And she wasn't acting like she was in pain. She wasn't yelping or anything like that. She just couldn't stand anymore. Her back
yeah,
legs were just giving out. It's a German Shepherd. Two things to take out German Shepherds most of the time. Hip dysplasia or cancer. So it was that was the call that we made and went to the vet. But again, you always have that doubt. Like, maybe it wasn't that. Maybe I could have done an x-ray and there was something else going on or something like that. I think it's the onus on the vet to have that conversation and be a little more honest about it. But I think that's the ethical side of when money is involved.
it's hard when sometimes you don't have a choice. If anybody's ever been to an emergency vet, you know how lovely that is. And it's one of the hardest things when you're already in a situation where you don't know it's time, right?
Hmm.
And you go to the emergency vet or to the vet, and it's a question of how many tests can we afford and how much is reasonable to do. And we have a German Shepherd, Max, and he had a sister that was with us. My fiance found them when they were like 2 weeks old, so he like raised these two puppies like bottle babies, you know what I mean? And she was 6 years old, so this would have been 2 years ago. And we came home, and her stomach was like the size of a yoga ball. And so my first thought is, oh my God, she's got bloat. So we rushed her to a vet. Of course, it was 9 p.m. at night because these things always happen at 9 p.m. at night. And they x-rayed her, and they said she doesn't have bloat. Her stomach is full of fluid, and so are her lungs, and so is her heart. She had congestive heart failure. So then, like you're saying, that decision, it's on you. Do I want to take the chance that my dog can have a little bit more life and it can be better with some treatment, or do I say goodbye now? And of course, nobody ever wants to say goodbye now. People always tell me, like, when they lose their dogs, it's like losing a family member. They don't need to tell me that because, like, God, I know, but I feel like a lot of people don't understand. Like, if you're not a dog lover, if you don't really love having dogs, it's not like owning a car or having a parrot or a fish. You know what I mean? It's a deep relationship, and it hurts when it ends.
It does. So when we talk about like suffering and things like that, for me, it's about true pain suffering. If you have a dog that has cancer, it's not treatable, but they're not in pain. They're none the wiser. So for me, it always comes back, yeah, is the animal in pain? How diminishes their quality of life? And that's what I base my decisions off of when it's time to say bye. It's never, never, never easy at all. Uh, and fortunately enough, there's tons of support groups out there, social media, and things like that. Because there's people out there like, oh, it's just a dog. You know, you catch me on the wrong day on that one. And it's not like, people don't
Yeah.
understand that relationship. And when you say goodbye to that, you know, um, it's hard. It's really, really hard.
Yeah. I see homeless people down here that they don't have anything more than the clothes on their back, but they still have their dog.
Yeah.
The dog doesn't abandon them, they don't abandon the dog. That's another level.
And you talk about like, having only having your dog. There's a great organization. I wear the shirts all the time. It's the Till Valhalla Project. and they have several shirts that said like, when I needed a hand, I found a paw, or the best
Oh,
therapists have
stop.
four
You're gonna make me
paws,
cry.
things like that, right? And so they do mental health awareness and things primarily for vets, and it's true. The cool thing about dogs, they don't judge. It's just they're just there, and they live in the moment, which is something that as humans we truly lack in this day and age in society. And you see those memes and pictures, like you have the guy sitting on the rock and he's like little thought bubble, and he's thinking about like the trip and the car and money, and the dog just has a little thought bubble, and it's of the exact same picture, just them together.
Yeah.
That's what you want to have with your dog, and that's what we inspire to do with training, so you can have that. So your dog is a blessing, and it's not a burden, and it's not like, oh God, I can't take my dog anywhere. It's out of control and things like that. You have a dog for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, right?
Yep.
Um, you never want to look back and go, man, I wish I would have done more. I really wish I could have taken my dog to the park more. I couldn't, and because they didn't behave, and they're
Yep.
out of control and things like that. And that's the whole premise behind what we do um, as trainers, and especially at Species Canine.
Yeah, I tell my fiance all the time, like we had Anastasia for 6 years, and you don't know how long we're gonna have Max or Tally or Bowie, right? Like tomorrow's promise to no one. I I don't ever want to look back and think, God, I should have taken her hiking more, or I should have played tug with her more, or like any moment where I'm sitting there and it's like, oh, you should really go walk the dogs or do something, and I feel tired. I always think of that as like, 10 years from now, how much money would I pay just to get this moment back to go take them for a walk? You know? That's why dog training is so important, is because you can maximize the joy you get out of the time you have with your dog.
Yeah, and that's what you truly want, is to do that. That's why you get dogs, right? There's no point in getting a dog if you're just gonna shove it in the backyard. Don't get a dog. You want to have that relationship and be able to take your dog places, and that's what we look to do here, is to extend the blessing of having a dog, not having it be a burden for people.
Yeah. I think that ties into another subject within the realm of euthanasia, which is behavioral euthanasia.
Mhm.
Um, the dog's behavior is too dangerous, and they believe that the best thing is to euthanize it, even though there's nothing physically wrong with it. Um, I have opinions about that. I'm sure you do too. Um, have you ever met somebody that's had to do that or thought about that?
Um, no, not that I can recall. Most people will just dump it at the pound, make it someone else's problem at that point. Um, you know, if you exhausted all options of training and you've done everything, especially that we teach, and the dog is just, you know, skipping steps in the aggression cycle, there's no warning whatsoever. The smallest thing is setting this thing off, or there's not a person or family or whatever it may be that can fit this dog's life, then yes, that might be a possibility. For a lot of this, also, you can do some denture modifications. You can move the canines. For modern dogs, canine teeth are not needed for killing and hunting and eating. So at that point, if it does bite somebody, you don't get the punctures from the canine. But there's a lot that leads up to that can be done long before we even have those conversations. My mentor, out of thousands of dogs that he worked with, has only met one dog in that time frame that he ever recommended that for.
Yeah.
Simply because it was just the genetics on this dog were just so hardwired that no matter what you did, it would skip steps in the aggression cycle, immediately go to a full-on attack. Wouldn't even give you a warning, just immediately. And the smallest thing would set it off. The dog wanted to go left, and you went right. It was on. That was leadership problem, right? So micromanaging and doing everything you possibly could to get this dog to understand they're not the leader, they're not being dominant. You're controlling all the resources, making all the decisions for them. And still, having issues. Then you have that conversation. But that's a rare dog.
Yeah. One in
That's
10,000.
yeah, it's so rare. As far as I've seen people's like dog. Oh, he growls at the food bowl. You need to euthanize it. No, you need to understand ethology. What's important about this, and why you want to understand this. There's Robin Williams. There's a movie, Greatest Dad, I think it was called, or World's Greatest Dad. It's a kind of a darker, more serious movie for Robin Williams to be playing. But he says in there that, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Euthanasia is the same thing when it's dealing with behaviors. It's a permanent solution to pretty much a temporary problem that can be fixed and or managed in a way that keeps people safe and the dog can still live a very productive, healthy life.
I think that behavioral euthanasia, um, a gigantic proportion of it is a dog training industry problem. In my opinion, trainers that do not know what they're doing are getting dogs killed because rather than say, I don't know what I'm doing, maybe you should go to a trainer that's more qualified for this, they want their ego to persevere and they say, this dog is just beyond helping. If I can't help it, this dog's beyond helping. This dog needs to be euthanized. And it's like, what did you do? Like, really, what did you do to help this family with this dog?
Yeah.
You don't understand dominance. You don't understand the ethology of the breeds. Most people don't. And then half of these trainers that tend to recommend behavioral euthanasia, half of these people are force-free trainers. Force-free trainers, so they're only going to use one half of the operant conditioning wheel and claim that that is more humane. But they're going to tell you to euthanize your dog, as though that is somehow less aversive than using a training tool for positive punishment.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And like you're saying, there certainly are situations, in my opinion, too, where you could have a dog that's just so up there, that's just so extreme in all of the things that can make it dangerous, not showing any signs, being very, very committed to causing lots of damage. It would be great if there's a sanctuary out there that's run by someone like you or me, and they're ready and they're committed and they have the money to take dogs like that, but there's not, or at least there's very few of them. And so in reality, how are you going to keep people alive if this truly is a dog that truly you do everything right and you're still not going to be able to manage that dog? Like you said, there are certainly people that have chosen to take out the canine teeth. But even then, I've seen some dogs where if that dog decided to bite me, even if it didn't have his canine teeth, my arm is getting crushed. Like, Murphy. I think you told me, you're like, I'm wearing my bite suit, but if he wanted to bite me, I'm just losing my arm.
Yeah.
You know?
For those who don't know, I have a client, a gigantic English Mastiff, 165 pounds, and he had some fear aggression when I first met him. So I was wearing my bite suit the first few times. But I told the family, I said, yeah, I'm wearing this, but it's more for my psychological, help here. Because if he really like hit my arm with all his force and actually caught my arm, I couldn't slip my arm inside the sleeve. He's shattering my arm.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not
Yeah,
that
but
many about it. Yo.
But scenarios like that and dogs with that power that are in scenarios like that, that's exceedingly rare, exceedingly rare. And not to get on my soapbox, but it's one of the things that I feel most passionately about is that there's so many dogs that people give up on, and it's because they're misinformed by uneducated trainers.
Yeah. And that's what we're here for. To help educate some people out there that want to be educated, right? You can't educate somebody that doesn't want to be educated. And like I tell people in my consults, I'll give you my opinion on some things, but for the most part, we're going to discuss it's science based. It's out there, for people to read and to study and go through those things. So when we're making those decisions to euthanize or rehome a dog and things like that, do your research, understand what you're doing and where you're going and the ramifications of this, and can you do something more before you make that permanent decision?
Anecdotal knowledge is not the same as empirical knowledge, right?
Mhm.
Like, so anecdotal, I've never been in a car crash, but I know, statistically speaking, car crashes occur every day on the roads around me. But just because I've never been in a car crash doesn't mean I'm going to tell you car crashes don't happen. And yet, in the dog training world, people love to do that. People love to do that. You know, we talked about this example in the last podcast. My dog sleeps on my bed all the time, and I never have aggression issues.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
I drive my car all the time and I've never been in a car crash. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean I don't wear my seatbelt. And I would hope that anybody that is looking at the possibility of euthanasia for whatever reason, that they would do their research in places that are empirically valid and you know, not just what some rando says on Reddit. Um, because it matters. The quality of your information matters in terms of your ultimate conclusion, you know?
Yeah. I could not agree more with that. And understanding where that knowledge is coming from helps a lot. But the point is, educate yourself now. When you go to your next vet appointment, whatever breed dog you have, ask your vet, what's the number one thing that takes this dog out? Is it cancer? Most times it's gonna be cancer. Is it hip dysplasia? Is it, blindness? Is it something, what should I, be looking for? Is there supplements I can give to help prevent or prolong anything from happening? Is there screenings that we can do that will help, earlier diagnosis so we can start treatment earlier? So when that day does come, you got to make that decision. You know, and you
Yeah.
don't walk out of that situation with doubt. Like I've asked the questions, I did what I could leading up to this point in time. I think that's just being a good owner. It's when I had to put my German Shepherd down,
What was your German Shepherd's name?
Doja.
Doja.
Yeah, she was a rescue. I had her for 10, 11 years, whatever it was. When that day, came, it was bad. It was a very, very bad, day for me to do that. But I knew it was hip dysplasia. I knew I saw this coming for weeks on end. It was just getting worse and worse and worse. And, it's tough, but, you want to try to prevent as much as you can. And, if you have a German Shepherd, or any large breed dog, joint support. Every one of my dogs are on joint support and fish oil. I give them fish oil and a raw diet. Help prevent those things from their
Yeah.
health.
My family's my childhood dog, she was a Labrador. Her name was Dakota. Like the most classic lab. Like you trust this dog with an infant. Okay. And
Don't say that. There's haters. You get hate now. Never
that
leave a
was
dog
meant
alone.
to be a little bit exaggerated to demonstrate how wonderful this dog was. But yeah, from the time that she was an adult, my dad gave her
Right.
fish oil, just like a really strict regimen and watching all of those things. And she lived until she was 15. Um, and she could walk until her very last day. When kind of like you're saying, like that was how we knew is just she couldn't get up. She was trying. And at that point, you're doing the last thing you can to love them, right? Like, this is the last thing I'm doing to show you that I love you is I'm setting you free. I'm letting you not be in pain anymore. And now I'm gonna cry. Um, yeah, but it's you can have more peace with the decision when you know that you did all that you could while the dog was alive to give them
Mhm.
that quality of life. And so before getting there, along the way, the journey along the way, make smart decisions. Do what you can.
Yeah. I remember telling the vet, when we're putting her down, saying that oh, we can all be so lucky. If you have some terminal painful disease, you're gonna lay there just in hospice, drugged out of your mind, try to keep you pain free until you die. We'd never do that to a dog, right? Or cat or fish, bird or anything, right? We just, let him go. And so that is that unselfishness of it, of, that one last act of love.
Yeah. This has been a sad episode. I'm gonna cry now.
But it's something that has to be talked about. Um, And kind of what prompted it was, I was telling you earlier, on mine, and he had a cat um, that passed away after 18 years. There's probably people watching this podcast who aren't even that old,
Yeah.
So it's pretty amazing. So as always, appreciate everyone's love and support and comments. If you want to reach out through the site, feel free to do so. If you have training questions, happy to help or drop them in the comment section. And as always, train smart.